areas that the day was divided into 4 areas. 1, we had the official opening. 2, we had the roundtable, quite an engaging roundtable discussion that involved high-level dignitaries who were in the room and engaged all of us. Then 3, we had a couple of plenary presentations, and to wrap up, we had breakaway sessions in the areas of energy, ICT, and water. In summary, during the discussions, it came out very clearly that infrastructure plays a pivotal role in the quest for regional integration and economic development. It also plays a major role to ensure peace and security. Indeed, infrastructure is very critical when it comes to poverty eradication or reduction, and it enhances trade, it attracts investments, it provides employment in general, but more so youth employment. It reduces the cost of power and, by extension, cost of doing business. It improves trade and facilitates free movement of persons and goods. Regional interdependence through free movement of persons and goods is an effective tool for fostering regional integration, peace, and security. That came out very clearly, I think, from nearly all presentations that were made yesterday. We also heard that our continent, Africa, has an infrastructure gap that is large and continues to stifle the continent's economic growth. The road network gap is estimated to be at around 60,000 kilometers, sorry. We still have a deficit of about 17 airports that we need to have. We also require, at a minimum, additional 7 seaports. We require 700 gigawatts of energy by the year 2040. And indeed, the Igad Regional Infrastructure Master Plan, which is a subject of our discussion, has plans for road networks, power, transmission lines, ICT, etc., and also targets to explore clean and renewable sources of energy in the context of climate change. Infrastructure could connect more than 270 million of inhabitants of our region to alleviate the key challenges that the region is facing. Notably, food security is only a challenge in some areas of our region. This is mostly due to infrastructural deficit to move food from areas of high productivity to those that have deficits. Capacity building is an urgent government, capacity building for urgent is required urgently among government institutions, the private sector, and of course other organizations in our region dealing with infrastructure development. This is to ensure that projects are delivered not only timely, but in a proper manner. Africa Development Bank is indeed at the center of infrastructure development in our region, and it is funding multiple projects, mostly in the area of transport, but other areas too, to connect our member states. Most of our member states are overstretched to servicing debt, but they are also struggling to set aside funds for infrastructural development. It was, however, pointed out, and I think from the chief guest, that the consortium of pension funds in Africa, with a capital base of more than US dollars 300 billion is looking for good bankable infrastructure projects to invest in. This is something to look at. On top of that, he identified areas that maybe we have not explored adequately: sovereign funds, insurance and pension funds, and even commercial banks are looking for good regional infrastructure projects to fund. A good example that we can look at, thinking outside the box, is the Grand Renaissance Dam in Ethiopia that has been fully financed by the citizens of Ethiopia to develop that particular project. I think there are lessons to take, and even moving forward, there could be some challenges, but I think all in all, it's an example to look up to. The inability to connect the Igad member states is not due to lack of funds, we were told. And this also came out very strongly by our colleagues from the Africa Development Bank, that it is not a money problem here. Vast resources are wasted on wrong undertakings, such as intra and interstate wars that cause instability and insecurity in our region. I think even the minister, the Honorable Minister from South Sudan, raised this issue that we have so much resources in our region, but I think our priorities sometimes, not always, but sometimes get mixed up. The issue of nationalism came up. It was stated that nationalism should be a driving force for infrastructure development, not a source of war, civil strife, and conflict. True nationalism is about providing better environment for one's country and people. The private sector no longer talks much about ICT. I think our colleague from Ethiopia, from the floor, raised this issue, but the private sector seems to be now looking at a bigger picture, and they're calling it the digital economy. In Kenya, for example, the private sector was involved in developing a digital economy blueprint and strategy, which has translated into digital infrastructure development, digital skills, and a thriving digital economy. The government is almost or we have an e-government platform or portal where most government transaction or services are offered online. And there are, again, many other cross-cutting benefits that come from this particular undertaking. The last area that I want to share with you is what the rapporteurs in the room and in the plenary and in the breakaway sessions managed to capture areas for action or call to action. One, it was identified that member states and development partners should support infrastructure development in the Igad region as a highway to peace, security, and prosperity. I need not say anything more there. Number two, development partners were urged to support implementation of the Igad Regional Infrastructure Master Plan, especially in the face of the many challenges that the region is facing, such as drought, desertification, the desert locusts, which have affected our region more severely in recent past, insecurity, instability, I've talked about, and now we have the Igad, the COVID-19 pandemic that we are all affected in one way or another. So in the face of this, we are calling upon development partners to continue engaging with us as we find lasting solutions. Three, government ministers and experts were challenged to commit themselves to implementing short-term plans that are in existence. So we are not short of plans and ideas. The challenge here is that we need to start implementing some of these projects or plans that we have identified. The private sector players were also asked to honestly give us feedback about the bankability of the priority projects that we have identified. At the same time, development partners were also urged to support and identify priority projects, and Igad was asked to provide a clear roadmap with regard to short-term goals within the infrastructure master plan. Finally, member states were challenged to stop internal conflict and manage insecurity as they hinder development of infrastructure, raise poverty levels in our countries and in the region as a whole, and also curtail free movement of persons and goods and perpetuate regional instability. To conclude, ICT again came up, and ICT should be a priority in our countries, in physical infrastructure development plans, as it is an enabler for integrated physical infrastructure development. Those are some of the ideas that the rapporteurs, the able team of rapporteurs, managed to capture. As we move forward, we will be cleaning them up as they find their way in the final report that we'll be sharing with all of you soon after this meeting, roundtable. I want to pause there, unless somebody thinks there is something major that we completely missed from what I've just said. The floor is open. It looks like the rapporteurs did a good job and managed to capture our thoughts and the ideas that we shared both in the plenary and in the breakaway sessions. So without further ado, and we are now approaching 9:30, we will start with our first presentation. And this presentation is coming to us from JICA, which is the Japan International Cooperation Agency. And the presenter of this particular session, or this presentation, entitled Passage Across Borders, is none other but Dr. Mogere. Dr. Mogere is a graduate with a doctorate degree in informatics from the Kenyatta University in Kenya. Right now, he's working for JICA, the Kenya office, as the Infrastructure and Evaluation Advisor. His area of expertise includes and is not limited to transport systems planning and management. He has spent a better part of the past 15 years actively engaged in academia, but at the same time also in development work. His area of work has mostly revolved around project management. Dr. Mogere is also a founding board member of the Evaluation Society of Kenya, which is an affiliate or is affiliated to the Africa Evaluation Association. So if I went to read his short bio or his bio, I think I'll be making a presentation on his behalf. So I will stop there and call upon Dr. Mogere to take the podium. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. Listening to the presenter talk about, I wondered whom he was talking about. It gives me great pleasure to be with you this morning. I apologize that we were not able to be represented yesterday, so that we can be able to share with you some of the works that we are doing as JICA. And maybe I would like to request that we could be able to start the presentation. Thank you. In the presentation, maybe you can put the viewer for. Okay. Let me say that under TCAD, first of all, I want to give a presentation from a global perspective, especially for the African development. From JICA, and then I'll go specifically to talk about what we are doing in this country and also the East African region before I could be able to drill down to the specific projects that we are involved in, especially in Kenya. Under Japan's, next please. Under Japan's commitment to Africa, we have what we call the corridor development approach, which was a commitment given under the TCAD 5. And you could see that from the Eastern African side, we are focusing mainly on the Nakala corridor and the Northern Economic Corridor. We also have other 6 plus the corridors that I've mentioned. To the west, we have the Maghreb, into the north, and what we call the growth ring, and I've tried to align it so that we can be able to see some of the alignments that we have with both Igad and the REX. The main point being to really support the backbone infrastructure for the development of Africa in at least 5 regions, by having a very comprehensive approach to regional development along those corridors. I want also to say that at least from this side of the region, Kenya has been supporting, JICA Kenya office has been having support for about 5 African countries, but what we're seeing increasingly, except now for Eritrea, Somalia, and Seychelles, a lot of the other programs have actually been being handled by those respective countries. And therefore, you will see a lot of what I'm going to present really focusing on what we are doing in our country, and especially talking to the topic which we have been given, the passage across the borders. If I look through the economic corridor that I'll be focusing on, next please, is the Northern Economic Corridor, which starts from Mombasa. We are then looking at the market of the East Africa, of Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and even the DR Congo that is coming, but not only that, with the neighboring countries. The whole idea of this program that we have is really access to the East African market. Not only that, the integrated and comprehensive approach that JICA is giving on the Northern Corridor is not just restricted to logistics, but also to the other areas, including the power and agricultural development, amongst the other sectors that we have. I would like to say that if I look at the Northern Corridor itself, a little more detail, in the next slide, is to look at the key aspects of how JICA then got into the involvement on this in the next slide, please. JICA has an approach of what we refer to as the quality infrastructure approach, beginning with a very comprehensive analytical work through the master plan. And for the Northern Corridor, if you look to the Mombasa side area, we have done a couple of about 6 master plans. One of that is the Mombasa Port master plan. we also looked at the Gate City Master Plan, which is the entry into the Northern Corridor, before we did what we refer to as the Northern Economic Corridor Logistics Master Plan. And the reason why we do that is to be able to identify the areas of investments. And not only that, but to be able to align most of the projects that need to be intervened with the government priorities and also the regional development aspirations, just such as the Igad, the East Africa, the Kida, and the like. So you could see that one of the corporations that we have is the one-stop border post, which really aims at building the capacity building for the East African customs. We also have had a very comprehensive approach to the two cities that have become, so to speak, one of the, if not addressed, bottlenecks to the efficient movement, and that is actually Kampala and Nairobi. And for Kenya, then we're also focusing on the secondary cities and beginning with Mombasa, and you'll see later on focusing on Kisumu. The whole idea is to break that single focus on Nairobi, which presents in then a big challenge for the logistics within the Northern Economic Corridor. Now, just to show you in our next slide, some of the areas that JICA is cooperating in Kenya and focus. We actually have a very comprehensive interventions with one of those being in economic and infrastructure development, focusing on the corridor, like I've said, and city development. We are also putting in quite a lot of resources to the improvement of power generation, transmission, distribution capacity. And I wish I had the time to talk about the percentages in terms of our contribution to the country's critical infrastructure in these two areas. There is also a focus on the agricultural development, basically to grow, to sell, and we're also looking at the heavy investment on the human resource, what we refer to as the next generation, with a focus initially of training at master's and PhD of over 1,000 students across Africa. And we are going to see some numbers for our country. Universal health care coverage, environmental protection, especially under now the COP26, and private partnership have become quite key in the way that we now are cooperating in this country, but also as a norm for JICA. Maybe the good news in the last, I think, 2 years, JICA now has another envelope which is not just focusing on the public or sovereign operations. Now we have the private sector envelope, which means we can now comprehensively address certain issues that we have been having also through the private sector way. So now JICA is not restricted to only assistance through the government system, but now we see JICA that is moving also towards the support of the private sector. In our next slide, I want to show you some of the areas and the numbers, and this is just some snapshot to look at the yen loan operation, which is one of our biggest operation that we have. And in the year that passed, I think 2019, 2020, we had a whole portfolio of over almost 400 billion yen. And the grant was a third of that, which was about 100 billion yen. If you look at the number of trainees and experts going to Japan and having that cooperation, we stand at an average of about 200 trainees this is for the country Kenya only, going to Japan every year. We have also increased this because we believe that construction and indeed development of infrastructure must, as a matter of urgency, incorporate the human aspect for purposes of operation and maintenance. And for that reason, quite a number of trainees are actually now attending to many institutes in Japan to study and understand how then we'll be able to deal with the O&M aspects of the key infrastructure that we have. The portfolio for grant for the country seems to be, if you look at it, going down, of course, because of the new status for the country, just to enable other neighboring countries to benefit as the economic growth is experienced in or even the rating of such countries like our country. In the transport sector, in our next slide, I want to take you through, we have three pillars when we look at the northern, especially on the part of the country, Kenya. We divided our programs into three. We have what we call the Regional Development Program, we have what we call the Mombasa City Development Program, and we have the Nairobi Urban Development Program. As a matter of fact, when we look through the Regional Development Program, the Port of Mombasa, which was identified by the World Bank's first economic update as perhaps the most critical infrastructure that was impairing the hinterland development, becomes a regional development program. And as such, you'll see quite a lot of intervention from JICA on expansion of capacity and efficiency at the Port of Mombasa because of its strategic implication that it has on this region. Under this, we also have the logistics of the Northern Corridor. So we have comprehensively done the master plan that links between Kenya and Uganda, and we hope that very soon we should also be able to do the same for Rwanda and also all the way to DR. We have just started and almost complete on what we call the Mombasa Gate Bridge, which is going to be quite iconic in linking, as we'll see, the Bergamo, Mombasa, Malindi, Lamu corridor. We are now in the phase 3 of the Port of Mombasa to expand its capacity, to double its capacity in terms of container handling that will be able to serve this region. Mombasa, which is our secondary city, is also one of our programs, and we began, like I said, through the master plan development, and now we are looking at the industrial development, what we call the special economic zone development to the southern part. We also realizing that that is a highland and there is the much that we can do for road expansion. We are now focusing on increasing the capacity of our assets through incorporation of the big data and especially the ITS, the Intelligent Transport System, which is under planning as we speak to enable easier flow of traffic within this secondary city. This is very critical, realizing that the GDP growth for this country can also come not only from Nairobi, but also experience and diffuse this to the secondary cities. Nairobi, which is our capital city, has also a huge challenge of traffic congestion. In fact, there is a whole strategy around how then we'll be able to intervene for Nairobi. But so to speak, is that Nairobi at the moment requires an integrated approach of the urban structure linked with the transportation planning for us to achieve our goal. Just to take you through one of the, in our next slide, one of our critical, which would be of interest to you, is our cooperation with the African Development Bank on the Malindi-Bergamo corridor development, which is currently on the design stage on the link to fix a southern link in the name of the Gate Bridge to the southern side. It's going to be one of the biggest projects that JICA has actually indeed carried in this region. And I've also indicated that under this arrangement, we are also implementing the Mombasa Intelligence Transport System and the Special Economic Zone to the south. Let me just take you slightly deeper on, in the next slide, over what we call the port area logistics development. Now, when we started the container terminal program, the main aim was to expand the capacity of the port from the 0.8 million TEUs to over 1.2 million TEUs. That meant that we looked at the expansion of the terminal, but also the cargo handling equipment for the same. The idea is to facilitate trade for the economic development of Kenya and the region. There is also the challenge of the evacuation system. We are lucky in the country that the capital city of Mombasa, of this country, is at least over 500 kilometers from the seaport. That enable us then to be able to ship and indeed move the containers or the boxes out of Mombasa. But within and outside the port, a lot of congestion. And just to give you an idea, in each one single day, there were about 4,000 trucks getting in and out of a single gate at the port of Mombasa. So you can imagine the amount of work that needed to be done on that. So for that reason, the evacuation system around and about the seaport has been a big preoccupation by JICA to be able to eliminate that congestion that it was. So you will see quite a lot of connecting roads between the container terminal and indeed the surrounding areas through enhanced restructuring of the urban structure for Mombasa, but also trying to have other support modes like the SGR, which has come also very handy to assist with the evacuation of the containers from the port of Mombasa. Now, when we look at the port development in our next slide, we also see that if you look at the economic growth of our country, which has been experiencing, and you compare that with Uganda to more than 4 to 5%, you will see that in the near future, and indeed in our demand forecasting, that we are trying to do a catch-up. We completed the first phase of the port in 2016, but that by 2021 is full, and we have to think about the next one. Phase 2 is going to be on stream from next year, mid next year, but we anticipate that by 2027, we will also need to actually expand and have a new container terminal. What am I trying to say? That with the development of the hinterland, the port becomes like the parameter to measure how well our nations are doing and how we then be able to trade with the rest of the world. Now, the other challenge that go with is not just the construction of the infrastructure and the equipment, but also a comprehensive approach on the technical cooperation by training the port workers and having the economic model and financial model to be able to support the maritime trade. Now, this direction has always been a very challenging one for reasons that it takes a long time for this training. But also at the same time, we also know that we want to see the competition between the ports and within the port. That presents in then the challenge of how we then approach. One is to be able to have training ahead of the construction and also be able to continue with the training to be able to handle those equipment. Let me go through some of the evacuation programs that we have, and that goes to the next slide. One of the roads that we've been working on when it comes to the evacuation system in the next slide within Mombasa is what we call the Mombasa Port Area Road Development Project. We have now completed phase 1, and this is basically linking connecting the Mombasa port with the special economic zone and also the northern corridor. Now, if we may be able to look at this road in the next slide, please, we will be able to see that, yes, that is the one. Next, please. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. Now, we call it the Mombasa Port Area Road Development Project. Reasons are that as you go into interconnectivity, even the road and the cost per kilometer becomes quite expensive because now we've got to link with the SGR, which is the rail, the port, and the road. And you can imagine the challenges then that we experience in terms of interconnectivity. This particular road, which is just phase 1 and 2, which was a credit line of about 40 billion Japanese yen, aims to not only connect to the special economic zone, but also the northern corridor and the southern side, which is to the Bagamoyo Malindi corridor. One of the features of this, we have one of the longest bridge in the region, which will be what we call Tessa Bridge, which will be 1.5 kilometers long. Quickly, because of time, we got the second one, which is the second part of the port development. Next, please. Yes. This one is 58.8 billion Japanese yen, which aims to expand the port, as I had mentioned. And right now, currently, we will say that in the port of Mombasa, we have made a contribution that 36% of all the containers are handled from the support of Japan. One of the last landmark, next please, one of the landmark projects that is going to, which we are now embarking on, are two. That is what we refer to as the project for the development of Dongo Kundu, aiming to attract the foreign direct investment. The biggest concern for the Northern Corridor is the competitiveness, meaning we have inflow through the import, unless because we don't have a manufacturing base strong enough to be able to take it over to the port. So one of the biggest exports we have in this region are empty boxes. Basically, the 20 and 40-foot containers going out of Mombasa. But we aim that if we have to reverse that process, then we must start to think about manufacturing. We must also start to think about foreign direct investments and attracting entrepreneurs, processing value addition. And this is one of the things that JICA is, we are involved in the Dongo Kundu Special Economic Zone. Now, connecting with that, of course, we've got to have world-class infrastructure, but also good incentives, tax incentives to enable the foreign direct investment. How we are trying to do that? Currently, we think that connection to that area through what we are now having as the gate bridge, you can have next so that we can see the whole, yes. To the south on this side is the special economic zone, and to the north is where we have the airport and the seaport, which is under development for the containerization, for the container terminal. But to the southern side, we have the road that is linking, we call Route B, and then we have the Likoni crossing, which is the only crossing you have to the south. And we are going to replace that. The country is going to have, for the first time, I think, a connection to the south through the Mombasa Port Area Road development, but also in the long run, we'll be able to fix by having this gate bridge, which is supported through JICA. This is going to be the longest cable stay bridge in Africa and the 21st of it in the world. If we go to the next one, it's going to be iconic in the sense that we will be able to, one, be able to connect the north and the south, and number two, like we say, at the midst of the median, we are going to have the construction phase will take 5 years, sorry for that. And then number two, we hope that that connection is very critical and it will enable then the development and boost for the southern side and the SEZ. The first phase is going to cost us about 47 billion, but this is the first, and we are going to have like 3 phases. So it's a commitment for more than 5 years. In fact, we estimated that in 7 years' time, we'll be able to finish. Now, the last of the projects that I want to talk about is in earnest, the development of the southern part of our port, what we refer to as building the special economic zone, but for manufacturing, and therefore the enabling berths that are associated with that. So we will do the first berth, which we call the DK1, Dongo Kundu berth 1, and this will be able to look at not on containers this time around, but also try to look at as a multi-purpose port that will be able to support the manufacturing part. The first of that supports about 37 billion shillings, that will be able to spur the development and indeed industrialization to the north. As I end my presentation, I want to say that when I look back in terms of commitment, the last 5 years and in the next 5 years for JICA, I think for Mombasa alone, we can confidently say an estimated about $4 billion in terms of investment portfolio that we have had. And the whole idea is to ensure that we remove the bottleneck that we experience for purposes of trading and at our exit or at the gate city, and then expanding that into the hinterland via the Northern Economic Corridor. I want to complete my presentation by saying that, which is the next one, which is the end of my presentation. I have put in 3 slides that marks our signature for Mombasa, and that one to the left side is the port, what you're doing at the port. The lower side is the container side, and on the main right side is the special economic zone for Mombasa to spur the development and to improve the competitiveness of the Northern Corridor. Thank you very much. Arigato gozaimasu.
Thank you, Dr. Steve Mogele, for the presentation, very important presentation on the activities that JICA is involved in the region. And I would request that we go to the next presentation, and then the floor will be open for the participants to ask any questions or make any comments. And Dr. Steve Mogera will be around to respond to any issues that may require his response. So without wasting any more time, I think we proceed to the second presentation, and that is going to be made by Sambini Tshakunda from the African Union Development Agency, Auda NEPAD. And he's going to make this presentation virtually. Sambini Tshakunda is the energy infrastructure expert at the Auda NEPAD. So we welcome him to make his presentation. Welcome, Sambini.
Thank you, Zakaria, and it's quite a pleasure and privilege to be presenting in this meeting on behalf of AUDA. But before I do that, let me start by congratulating you, the Secretariat, as well as all those who have been part of organizing this meeting on this successful meeting, and also to thank you for inviting AUDA to make this presentation that I'm going to be making today. So let me share my screen so that we can then get into the presentation. Kindly confirm that you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see your screen, so go ahead, Sambini.
No, thank you very much. So what I'll do is I'll start by introducing AUDA for some of you that who may not be aware about the history and genesis of the African Union Development Agency. Session of the Assembly of the African Union Heads of State, which was held in Mauritania in June 2018. There was a decision that was made that to transform the then NEPAD Planning and Coordinating Agency into the African Union Development Agency. And this was part of the global African Union reforms, which to improve the union's impact and as well as operational efficiency. And in that decision, our mandate was divided into 4 components. The first one being to coordinate and execute priority regional and continental projects to promote regional integration towards the accelerated realization of Agenda 2063. Under that, I think one of the continental programs that we are promoting is the program for infrastructure development in Africa, which is aligned to the objectives of this roundtable. And then the second component, component of our mandate is to strengthen capacity of African Union member states as well as regional bodies, and advance knowledge-based advisory support. And then the last one being to undertake the full range of resource mobilization and serve as the continent's technical interface with Africa's development stakeholders and development partners. This is also the second part of the presentation that we are going to make today. So we will present to you the program for infrastructure development in Africa, the projects that were identified, the kind of resources that we're looking at, and those resources that we don't need to immediately mobilize to make sure that we prepare these projects to bankability. So let me also take you now through the history of the program for infrastructure development in Africa, but I know some of you may have been along this journey, for a longer time than I have. But just to recap, to see where we have come from, you would recall that we established this, PIDA was established in 2012, and then in 2012 as well, we then identified the PIDA PAP 1, which set the priorities from 2012 to 2019. And then after, the following year in 2013, we had Agenda 2063, which came into effect. And in 2019, we then had the midterm review of PIDA, and that's when the first phase came to an end, and then we started developing the second phase of PIDA. And when we were designing now the second phase, we had now to align the second phase to Agenda 2063. And in doing that, the member states made the decision that we should be guided what they called the integrated corridor approach. And I think this is also in line with what Dr. Mugere presented on their corridor development approach as well. So we developed the integrated corridor approach as a concept, and then we used it to develop the PIDA project selection criteria for PIDA PAP 2, and then we of course went through the whole process where we selected the priority list of projects, and complementary to this priority list of projects, we also developed a PIDA partnership strategy, an implementation strategy, as well as a financing strategy. So now, just to take you through some of the key components of the PIDA integrated corridor approach, and I think this is something that also came from the presentations that were made yesterday. So you'll see that there is an alignment with what you discussed yesterday, what has just been presented by Dr. Mugere, and what we are going to present as part of the integrated corridor approach, that there is that close alignment. So I think the main concept, the main objective of the integrated corridor approach is that it is based on a multi-sectorial economic development corridors as a nexus between the PIDA, AUDA, the PIDA sectors, which is transport, the transport, energy, ICT, and water, but also to their nexus with the other economic sectors such as industrialization, trade, agriculture development, food security, health, education, and trade. And because this was also developed during this unprecedented time of COVID-19, we have also had to rethink as well how we develop infrastructure in this pandemic, but also in the real challenges that we are faced with concerning climate change. So we have also developed 7 key principles now that we used in implementing PIDA projects according to the PIDA integrated approach. So the first one is that these projects have to catalyze job creation, and of course this is through directly during the construction of the projects, but also indirectly after the construction and during the operational phase of the project, so that we then stimulate economic development and other economic activities which maximize job creation. And for that, we estimate the job creation potential of each PIDA project using a job creation toolkit. And then the second one, and most important one, is that this infrastructure that we are designing has to be climate resilient, so that the designs, they are designed in such a way that they will be able to withstand these the impacts of climate change that we see in terms of the extreme weather events. And some of them we have already seen them because which had a devastating consequence on our infrastructure. So we now need to start thinking about how we make sure that the infrastructure that we design for the next 10, 20, 40 years is designed to suit the purpose given the changing environment that we are in. And of course, they have to be gender sensitive. They have to be economically viable and financially viable. And I think these are some of the things that have been discussed yesterday in terms of broadening the sources of finance to include, to make these projects attractive to our institutional investors as well as the private sector. So I will not go into details on that in this presentation. But now, during the process, we received 240 projects, and 13 of them were found to be ineligible. And one of the eligibility criteria for these projects was that they had to be part of regional projects. They had to be in the regional infrastructure development plans, such as the ones that you are discussing today. And also they had to fall within the 4 infrastructure sectors that I've also mentioned earlier on. And so in the end, we ended up with 214 hard infrastructure projects as eligible. And some of these projects, as you'll see later on, have been put in the reserve list because we were able to shortlist about 69 projects. Ideally, we were looking at 72 projects, but 4 are still being discussed at the African Union level. So this map shows you now the distribution of all the PIDA projects and the financial requirements that are required for this project. So coming to Igad as well as East Africa, we've got 13 infrastructure projects. And the estimated capex of these projects is about $37.8 billion that are required for the next 10 years to implement these projects. So on average, that would be like an investment requirement of about 3.7 billion a year that we need to mobilize as part of this second phase of the program for infrastructure development in Africa. But all in all, for the whole PIDA, we are looking at about 160 billion required for the next 10 years. And then on the right side of this presentation, you will see the sectoral distribution that most of the projects are mainly in transport, and you also see that that transport bias is also self-evident in the list of projects that you prioritize for East African. For the East African region. So then that is followed by energy projects, water, as well as ICT projects. So so I think yesterday, what clearly came out is that, especially from the remarks by the High Rep on infrastructure, the Right Honorable Raila Odinga, that we also need to, whilst we're thinking about mobilizing resources for the implementation of these projects, we also need to think carefully about how we mobilize resources for the preparation of this project, so that, like as has been mentioned, that these projects have to be prepared to bankability. so that we can be able to tap into the available resources for the implementation of the projects. So you'll see in this slide that we need to mobilize about $8.1 billion for project preparation. So moving on to the next slide, this slide presents to you the list of projects that we've been prioritized for in the East African region, and you'll see that there is the Lapsset Rail project, which is the part of the Lapsset corridor, and then we also, and that the fact that the majority of the projects are in the transport sector, followed by energy, and then ICT and water projects. So now, what have we done so far? What have we done with these projects since they were approved by the heads of state in 2021? So what we have done is that we have used the ASDM advisory services to screen these projects. But let me just emphasize a little bit more about what the SDM is. So the SDM is a special mechanism, is this service delivery mechanism, which was set up as one of the instruments to accelerate the implementation of projects. So the SDM focuses on mobilizing resources for early stage project preparation, so that we then prepare these projects so that they are eligible for funding through the project preparation facilities, such as the NEPAD IPPF. But over the years, it has grown, and it is now the main instrument that we now use to make sure that these projects are pushed through the project preparation cycle up to bankability. So we have taken the PIDA-PAP2 list of projects, and we have screened these projects using the STM quick check methodology to assess the status of the projects and understand the gaps, and to identify the activities that are needed for us to be able to then progress these projects through the project preparation cycle. And through this exercise, we have then categorized these projects into those projects that are well advanced, that have secured funding for project preparation and are on course to be prepared to bankability. And then we've got a second category of projects. These projects now are those projects that need funding for early stage project preparation, as well as funding from project preparation facilities. And so we have done this exercise. Now we screened the 69 projects that I mentioned earlier on, and we appraised 43 projects. And from these 43 projects, we produced 30 notification reports. And these notification reports tell us the status of the project and the support that they need. And then we have also then developed detailed project concept memorandums for 6 of them. And so now, using that information that we have obtained from this exercise, we are in the process of developing 30 project features, which will then be presented during the upcoming PIDA week to DFIs and the planned PIDA financing summit in 2022. So this will now enable us now to start to systematically mobilize resources for project preparation, which is critical for us if we are to make sure that we have a pipeline of bankable projects before we then ultimately mobilize resources for the implementation of these projects. So now, in conclusion, I would like to, as I mentioned, that we will be presenting these projects during the 7th PIDA week. And this year's PIDA week is going to be held from the 6th to the 10th of December in Nairobi, Kenya. And we will, I'm sure some of you have already received invitations to participate in this annual annual event for PIDA. And so for those who haven't, we would like to extend that invitation to you, and you'll see the link for PIDA Week in my presentation, which I will share with the organizers of this meeting after this presentation. So with that, I want to thank you and wish you the best in in the rest of the discussions that are slated for today. But still, meanwhile, we are available for any questions and answers that may arise from our presentation. Thank you. So over to you, Chair.
Yes, thank you very much, Simbini Shakunda, for that presentation on Auda NEPAD and the PIDA PAP 2. And now we open the floor, and so that the participants can raise any questions they have, or also maybe comment on the two presentations from JICA and also from Auda NEPAD. So the floor is open. Participants, you have the time to contribute. Thank you. The hands up from one of the participants, also from Kenya. I can see from Sudan and from Kenya. So we start with Kenya, then we go to Sudan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is James Deuri from the Ministry of Transport, Kenya. And I would like to first make a comment on the presentation from Dr. Mugere, and then ask two questions. First, I would like to thank Dr. Mugere for the very good presentation. Indeed, it is an eye-opener on what JICA is doing in the region and particularly in the country. And I particularly would like to thank JICA for the quality infrastructure. Indeed, our cooperation with the government of Japan has borne fruit. We can see the kind of infrastructure that has been developed in the country. And we cannot, I think we have seen the kind of quality that we should be going for. The Japanese are known for quality, and indeed a lot of capacity building has been brought into the country through this support. Now, I have two questions on the presentation, and the first one is on the two bridges that Dr. Mugere mentioned, that is Tessa Bridge and Mombasa Gate Bridge. Maybe I didn't get the timelines, but it would be good to know when we expect the works to start for the two bridges, and maybe when to expect to complete the works. The second question is for the Mombasa Gate Bridge. I know the bridge will be high. The clearance across the channel will be high, so that it can allow big ships. Now, the question is the kind of displacement that we expect at the approaches, because I know the issue of resettlement is a sensitive issue, and we would want to know how many project-affected persons will be expected to be resettled. And you know, what kind of, I know I come from the ministry where the implementation will be hurdled, but just for my information, it would be good to know what plans there are. Thank you very much.
We go to Sudan.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you very much. First, I would like to thank the two presenters, Dr. Mogera and Mr. Chimi, for very good and enlightful presentations. I have one question to Dr. Mogeri. When we look at the projects that JICA is implementing in Mombasa area and in the Northern Corridor, I would like to ask about your experience regarding your relations with the local communities, and also I would like to see the component for the different projects. Is it wholly financed by JICA, or part of it is financed by the government of Kenya and other partners? Because in one of the slides I saw that African development was financed. And I also would like to say that, to give us about the total contribution, the total cost of these projects in US dollars, because in the presentation it was in Japanese yen. For my friend from the African Union, Kida, I would like also to ask about
recording in progress.
About the implementation of the Priority Action Plan 1, the level of implementation, how far we have been successful implementing PAP 1, how many projects we have implemented, what was the level of implementation, and what were the obstacles that we have faced, and what are the lessons learned from that decade in order for us to avoid them in the second Priority Action Plan, and whether there are any opportunities for the PAP, for the second PAP compared with the first PAP. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sudan, for those issues. Then we go to Tripline Consultants.
Thank you. A question for Dr. Magari. JICA's support on the port logistics cluster in Northern Corridor is very impressive. One area that stands out to my mind is the port productivity capacity issue has a lot to do with port reform. And could you talk a little bit more about port reforms, introducing landlord port model and leveraging private sector investment in line with global good practice? Thank you.
Thank you. And we have South Sudan and also Uganda. So we start with South Sudan, then go to Uganda.
Yeah, thank you. Tom Remis from South Sudan Energy Sector. My question is direct to Mr. Stephen Mugere. I would just like to know the percentages of JICA intervention in the Igad state, in the Igad member states, especially in the energy sector, and if there is a challenges that facing the percentages to be low in some member state countries. Thank you.
Uganda, Gerard, go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is Gerald Ekinu from the Ministry of Works and Transport, Uganda. I would like also to thank Dr. Mugere for his presentation. I just wanted to know the progress in terms of implementation of the master plan for the Northern Economic Corridor. What is the progress so far? I thank you very much.
I think, can we have some response, then we go to the second phase of reactions from the participants. So I would like to give the opportunity to JICA, first of all JICA, who need to respond to issues raised by Kenya on the two bridges, and then the Mombasa bridge, the displacement to the approaches, about the resettlement of project-affected people. Then JICA on the Northern Corridor and Mombasa project implementation, whether it's wholly financed by JICA or whether government and other partners are involved. then triple line on the northern corridor logistics and involvement of the private sector. Then South Sudan on the JICA and energy sector intervention. And finally, the issue raised by Uganda on the northern corridor economic corridor. So over to you, Dr. Steve Mogere.
Thank you very much. I want to thank every delegate for the keen interest on the presentation and the responses that you have given. Let me begin by addressing the issue around the two bridges that my friend, colleague, Engineer James Deuri mentioned about the Tessa Bridge, which is part of the Mombasa port area road development. And I think you were asking with regard to the construction. Let me say that construction is ongoing for this particular bridge, and it's expected to be completed around 2024. There's about 3 years. From now, it's around about 30% already. And it is part of what we call package 2 of the larger Mombasa Port Area Road Development Program. Regarding the Mombasa Gate Bridge, which is going to be quite extensive, we are doing the detailed design right now, and we hope to get over to the bidding process for construction from possibly the mid next year. So we expect that from 2022 end or early 2023, we should be able to start the construction. Then construction will take over 5 years, hopefully, to be able to complete. It's a very tight area for construction because ships must continue, because that is the entrance into the port area. And yes, you've alluded to that in the second response, where you are talking about the clearance. The clearance for the Mombasa Gate Bridge is at 69 meters above high water, just to enable the post-Panamax ships to pass, but also not too high for the flights, the flight path, because it's also towards the landing for the Mombasa International Airport. So the application of technology must be able to look through those perimeters, and thank you for that. In terms of displacements and resettlement, this is a big issue. As you know, Mombasa is one of the oldest cities we have in the region. Quite a lot of aspects have to be taken into consideration. This is going to be an expressway passing through the city, just as you are going to see the one for Nairobi. Luckily for Nairobi, the right-of-way is secured. But for Mombasa, we are going to see quite a number of displacements. But that is being worked on with a lot of careful consideration, and especially around the highland side. I don't have the numbers. I have the one for the Mutesa on the other side, but I don't have the one for Mombasa Gate Bridge. But I think after this, I should be able to share this with you. But I must say that the consultants and the government, many people have been mobilized. This project is also unique because we are going to have also public information. We also intend to have actually a museum bridge to be able to show in case we have any artifacts, because this is an old city and with a lot of historical and cultural aspects that we expect to have. With respect to the question, or indeed response from my colleague from Sudan on the financing, whether the projects that I've mentioned are fully financed by JICA alone or the government of Kenya, I want to say that in all our projects, the government of Kenya has a role in terms of financing, even where, like in the port, we have the project financing 100%, but you know there is an uneligible part of the project, like the taxes and even issues to do with resettlement that has or is actually being handled by the Kenyan government side. I want to say that in terms of disbursement, we've been operating on an 80% share from JICA, 20% share from the Kenyan side. But in other projects like the port, we have had 95% JICA and 5% government. But now the way we see it, especially for the MGB, it is at 100% share and the government to handle the non-eligible tax. So a straightforward answer is yes, the Kenyan government has a role, and indeed more than we imagine, there is quite a lot that go into the taxes and resettlement. There was a question from my colleague around the port logistics and the private sector involvement. In 2001, the government took a direction of making Mombasa, KPA, which is the Kenya Ports Authority, a landlord. What that means is that incrementally, KPA's work would mainly be the construction and management of the superstructures, while having strategic private sector participation on the operations, as it were. Of course, this is a very slow process, but really our intention for efficiency is to have as much as possible both the private and the public participation in the maritime trade. So the focus is still there. It's a slow process, and we are working with the Kenyan government to really be able to have the involvement in one way or the other. You of course know that in the container freight stations already the private sector are participating in the logistics of the same, but I understand that incrementally we expect to see more and more of this oh, thank you very much. I want also to, sorry, I just got a small distraction. I'm just enjoying here about the other breaches that we are involved in the region and the information needed, but maybe I will handle that. But I just want to say that generally speaking, for the Northern Corridor, the role of private sector cannot be overemphasized. In fact, we have about 199 projects identified under the Northern Economic Corridor, logistics, that is both Uganda and Kenya, and a lot of that will mean involvement of the private sector. So I want to say that other than the port productivity increment through private sector involvement and competition, but we also want to see more and more of this to support government. I didn't catch the question from our South Sudan colleague, but I guess this is what he has alluded to see the progress made on the Freedom Bridge, the Jonglei, Malakal, any information on that. Perhaps when I was making my presentation, I focused more on the Kenya and perhaps Uganda. I may have to go back and give, if I get this contact, I could be able to give the actual progress on the same. But on the question by Jared from Uganda, which is the last response I want to give, regarding the progress on the Northern Economic Corridor, yes, quite a very important question. One that I want to say that the master plan was completed. I think now in Uganda, I think it went all the way to the cabinet approval. In Kenya, we did have at the sectoral level, it was actually completed. And I think one of the biggest challenges that we found ourselves in the development of this master plan, and perhaps what we are going to see in many of these, is the approval process and then the commitment to be able to all of us Larry and implement the master plan as it were. So what I want to say, approvals were done in the two governments, and we also have seen in some respects some projects being taken, but in terms of the actual percentage, normally we do an evaluation as JICA, what we call the ex-post evaluation, 2 years or 2 to 3 years after the implementation, after the approval. We haven't done this so that I can be able to give the actual percentage of implementation. So I must say that the process has started, and we hope to see in the next 1 or 2 years to see the percentage of the implementation of this master plan. Thank you very much, and over to you, Chair. In case there's anything I've forgotten, please remind me.
Thank you, Dr. Mugere. And before we give the floor to Auda Nepad, there is a question by Gilbert Maeti from African Consulting, who is asking, what is the model for development of the infrastructure facilities at the Dongo Kundu Special Economic Zone? Will the port develop and lease shore facilities, or will it allocate land for lease sale to investors? I don't know whether Dr. Mugele, you are in a position to answer this, or we have a Kenya Ports Authority around, or government body here from Kenya who can be able to answer this question.
Thank you, Chair, for that. I would have, if we have anybody from the Kenya Ports Authority, or indeed from the Kenyan government, the whole idea, the special economic zone, is really the private sector investment. The details on how this is going to be done has been dealt with broadly in terms of the policy of inviting the private sector, but the details and actually how it's supposed to be done, I would have loved if we had the Kenyan government officials to respond to that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Mogere. So now we proceed to Auda Nepad, and I think the only issue raised was from Sudan, who wanted to know about the success in the implementation of the PIDAPAP 1, and what are the lessons to learn, and maybe also help in the realization of PIDAPAP 2. So over to you, Sambini.
Thank you, Chair. So I think let me use my privilege of presenting online so that I can also share my screen. So in terms of the success, if you go to VPIC, the Virtual PIDA Information Center, you can see here on my screen, you can see the status of all of the projects that were in the first phase of PIDA. So you'll see that we had 76 projects that were 78 that were under construction, and then some under at the tendering stage. But you can also go in detail because the success was different for all the sectors. Like, for example, if you go to transport, the picture change is slightly different because you now see that we have 37 projects that are in operation, 46 that were in construction. For energy, let me see. Let me quickly just, for energy, we had 3 that were in operation and 6 in construction. So we are continuing to update this information, and you can all log in and see the status of the PIDA projects. But in terms of the lessons that we learned, let me share with you 4 of those lessons and how we have addressed them. The first one was that the key lesson was that it's ineffective for us to develop these infrastructure projects in isolation, because in most cases, for them to be effective, you really need to look at the interlinkages between the various sectors. And this is why we then adapted the integrated corridor approach, so that we can increase the social economic development impact of infrastructure development on the continent. And the second lesson that we learned was that we had a very long list, 400 projects, and yet the resources that we had available were not sufficient for us to really push through those 400 projects. And this is why in the second phase of PIDA, the number of projects was limited to 10 projects per region. And in addition to that, we also then agreed that we should have a rolling list so that those projects that would have reached maturity and exited reached their financial close will exit the pipeline, and then they'll be replaced by those projects in the reserve list. Earlier on in my presentation, I mentioned that all in all, we've got 234 projects that are in the reserve list. We've prioritized 69 of those, and these are the ones that we'll focus on. And then when we get to the midterm review in 2025, we will review that list and then allow projects to exit the priority list, and then bring in some of those projects from the reserve list. Now, the third lesson was that related to financing. We didn't have sufficient resources for the implementation of the projects. Obviously, from the fact that the infrastructure financing gap still remains on the continent is evidence of that financing gap. But most importantly, the financing gap in terms of the project preparation, resources that are needed for us to prepare this project. So that is why, as part of this second phase of PIDA, we developed the financing strategy, and that financing strategy has clearly outlined the resources that are needed for us for project preparation. And we are working, and complementary to that, we are also transforming PIDA Week so that it will be a platform where PIDA projects will be able to pitch their projects to project preparation facilities and be able to mobilize resources for project preparation, starting with this year's PIDA Week and the planned investment forums in 2022. The last lesson relates to the fact that even after these projects have been prepared, when you submit these projects to DFIs, they are still deemed as unbankable. So we have developed PIDA implementation strategy, which is complemented by PIDA implementation guidelines. And in these guidelines, we are systemizing the project preparation cycle and standardizing it so that we make sure that as the project moves through the project preparation cycle, it meets the minimum basics that are required at each stage for us to make sure that by the time we get to the end of the project preparation cycle, these projects are prepared to bankability, and they are deemed to be bankable by the financiers who will be considering these projects. And for this, we have also developed the PIDA quality label, and this quality label will be able to will enable us to assess the quality of entry and exit of these projects as they pass through each of the project preparation cycles, so that we make sure that a project meets the requisite quality before it proceeds to the next project preparation cycle. So this is some of the lessons that we have learned, and hopefully we will continue to learn and refine as we learn more lessons from this second phase of the project preparation of the PIDA PAP 2. So thank you, Chair, and over to you.
Thank you, Tishi, for that information and clarification. So now we go to the next phase of questions and contribution from the participants. Over to Ethiopia.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you also the presenters for the nice presentation. My point is on PIDA PAP 2 project, and one of the projects for East African regions is composed of 3 elements, and one of it is the submarine fiber point of presence, and the other one is regional smart hub facility, and within this project the third component is the data center facility. Of course, the project is very important, particularly in order to create interconnection among the region, and also to create through smart hubs and facilities to create job and wealth job and wealth creation can be ensured through this implementation of these such projects. But I just want to know some pointers like locations of the implementation and the significance of identifying the locations such that particularly the regional smart hub facility and the data centers will be situated in a position where to realize the regional integration. The other point is some details are also important if highlighted or mentioned, particularly with regard to the intentions behind the regional smart hub facility and the contents within this facility, and also the level or tier level of the data center which is supposed to be built, and the facility size which is expected to be implemented in the data center facility. So this is of course a single project in the name of transboundary submarine fiber point-of-point presence and regional smart hub facility and data center, but it has three critical elements within it, which are submarine fiber, regional smart hub, and data center. So I just want to get some location details, contents within the smart hub facility, and also the locations with regard to the data centers. Thank you.
Then we have Somalia.
I tried to raise my hand several times, and in fact, I did not get that opportunity. I had one question for Mr. Mugera, JICA, in fact, and I want to just ask the forum to just give me a chance to ask Dr. Mugera. Let me take this opportunity to thank the Igad regional organization for the hosting of this important infrastructure roundabout here in Nairobi. I would like to also thank Dr. Mugera for his wonderful presentation. I would like to shed a light to projects he was just presenting, and I would like to share with the forum that Somalia has some projects with JICA, through Japan government support. May I know if projects mentioned in his record, because I wanted that the members know that Somalia has these projects with JICA through Japan organization, and I have not seen in the presentation, and we have we are just having a project in several infrastructural sectors like construction, fishery, ICT. So may I ask Ms. Dr. Mugera to just go back and just give us a brief about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Somalia. Now we go to Uganda.
I want to thank the presenter from Auda for the good presentation that he has made. I also want to thank Auda for their contribution in preparing projects. As Uganda, we have benefited, but my concern is on the speed at which we are preparing these projects. You will note from presentations yesterday, one of the presenters mentioned that Africa, we are just taking off, meaning that some other people have left us. So we need to take off at a very high speed so that we can catch up with those who have left us. And in that regard, the speed at which these projects are prepared, I think we need to work on mechanisms how we can fast track them. And I would request Auda NEPA that they put in place measures where they involve to package these projects and prepare feasibility studies to help us do that exercise much faster. I thank you.
I think we can go to the reaction from JICA and Auda NEPA. We start with the JICA. Dr. Steve Mogere, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I like the sentiments that have been given regarding the PIDA and the identification. Let me address, yes, a friend from Somalia. In fact, Somali office cooperation is is actually managed. I have colleagues in the office who actually do the Somali operations. So you're right, actually, that we should be able to share in detail perhaps the specifics of the Somali program. Let me say that so that I don't speculate on this. Allow me that I will have your contacts, then I can be able to share with you, or indeed with the chair, the JICA's program in Somalia. I'm very sorry I just focused on the Northern Economic Corridor, but I'm aware, just like you've mentioned, that we have projects that are aimed at supporting Somalia, especially coming out of the conflict. I know that Somalia doesn't have the yen loan operations yet because of the status, but I know that there are grant and the technical cooperation programs that are aimed at strengthening the systems and supporting that country. So if I will get your contacts, I can be able to share with you a comprehensive strategy and also the business plan for JICA's operations in Somalia. Going to the Ugandan side, I totally agree with you. The speed of preparation for the projects and also the formulation, I would say that planning is very key. I know that we have the notion around how long it takes for the projects to come, but another problem that I also find even after the projects have started are issues what our Kenyan colleague and friend had mentioned about resettlement and how the ease with which then the projects are implemented and absorption for the same. Specifically, I would say that projects in urban areas have a lot of challenges and problems with even the rate of involvement. And what I've also seen lately are, of course, the issues to do with the non-eligible investment. And lastly, what I wanted to say is I know that we speak a lot about co-financing to be able to deal with the programs that are especially cross-boundary. I think that's another area that we need to put more effort if we were to able to achieve and for faster and speed project implementation, but also more importantly, to be able to connect our countries for the betterment of our people. So thank you very much for those comments. Speed is very critical for our project for us to realize the benefits of the same. Thank you.
we give the floor to Tishi to respond to the issues raised. Over to you, Tishi.
Well, thank you very much, Chair. So I think there are two issues raised. The first one deals with the ICT project, the allocation and the scope. Maybe from my side, just if I could just mention that these projects are submitted to us through the regional economic communities, and the scope is largely defined by the member states. So at this stage, I will not be in a position to really confirm the scope of those projects that have been highlighted, because this is something that is defined by the member states, and we would not be in a position to speak on behalf of the member states. But I think we stand to be guided by you and the parties involved in the project on the scope and the design. And then also, just before I conclude that point, just to mention that as I mentioned earlier on, even though the scope is defined by the member states, we also encourage the use of that the integrated corridor approach in defining how these projects are linked to the other PIDA sector projects, but also most importantly the other economic sectors as well within the member states where these projects are being implemented. And then the last point, the second point was in terms of speeding up the project preparation. Yes, I think that is a very, very critical point, because most of the projects that we are working on have been in the pipeline since a very long time ago. Some date back as far as the 60s, and they've been feasibility studies that have been done before, and now we are updating them. So, but on our part as AUDA, we estimated that so far the project preparation is taking about between 7 to 9 years, because of several reasons, really, some of them which are out of our control. But our aim is to bring that back down to about 3 years. And how are we doing that? This is what I explained earlier on, that we are digitalizing the project preparation cycle, systemizing it so that we are, at least we have a project implementation plan that we are working on with from the time we engage with the project, and we agree on that plan with the member state. And then that guide us now with all the activities in terms of mobilizing resources for the project preparation, doing the various project preparation activities on time and according to that plan, so that we try and reduce this the length, that the time that it takes for these projects to reach to be prepared to bankability. And of course, the use of the PIDA quality label, and ensure that all of our efforts during that time are not wasted. And by the time we are done, that project is ready for presentation to the DFIs, and in a way that it will be deemed bankable by the financiers. So we count on the cooperation of the member states to make sure that we all work collectively to speed up this process, in terms of starting from mobilizing resources to the implementation, and making sure that we shorten this project preparation cycle. Thank you, Chair. Over to you.
Thank you, Tishi. And then there was the issue, question raised by Ethiopia, and I would refer Ethiopia to our project profile booklet, page 31, which gives the specifics of the transboundary submarine fiber POPs and regional smart hub facility and data center. Actually, this project was fronted by Kenya, who want to have the smart hubs data center in Mombasa, and have POPs at all its border points with neighboring countries, so as to share the submarine fiber optics at the border with Uganda, at Busia, Another pops at Mandera border with Somalia and Ethiopia. Another one at Nadapa border with South Sudan. And the other one at, another 3 with Tanzania, that is at Lungalunga, Namanga, and Horiri. Then we have Moyale with Ethiopia. So the project booklet has the information on page 31. And then our master plan. And these documents are, the link was shared with all participants in our website. There is the Igad Regional Infrastructure Master Plan. Documents are there, and there's more information on this project. Thank you. Now, we'll be proceeding to the tea break. Before we break we have the breakout sessions. JICA wants to give some to have some intervention. So JICA, the floor is yours before I close this session. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to have some intervention over and above what my colleague from the PIDA have mentioned on NEPA, that some suggestion, what we see, how we can be able to reduce the project preparation period. Indeed, we as JICA have, of course, received a lot of beating sometimes on this, that we take quite a long time to prepare projects. Some of the areas that I think, learning from the past, we will urge member states and our counterparts. I think one is to agree on strategic studies that we need to have, common strategic studies that we need to be having together, including anchoring the projects that we have in mind under the master plans and through analytical work and government, so to speak, master plans or visions. If we are able to anchor these, I know that every development partner, including JICA, and indeed even the multilaterals that the World Bank and the African Development Bank, will do our country strategy every 5 years. And I think this, we can always have that as a cycle with the governments that are come in after every elections. I think it will be, I've seen that it's much faster and easier when we have these projects that we have in mind anchored and through proper studies that are already done in anticipation that we are going to have this project in future. The other way is, clearing the corridor, knowing very well that resettlement, if we can be able to speed up resettlement, is really through resource allocation. I also see that this is really almost every single project that we handle, we spend almost a half of the time on the resettlement. And I guess that is why my friend James was trying to allude to, if we are going to do Mombasa Gate Bridge, such a massive project, how many people are going to be removed? So the safeguard, like our headquarters in Tokyo, and I will tell you the World Bank, the biggest challenges we have, if the safeguard people raise a hand, the projects, actually go slow. There is one more criteria that is now coming under the OECD, that it's not just about maybe that one project that JICA is doing, but there is now another extra evaluation criteria that has been introduced, which is coherence, meaning how well is your one project that you're doing related with the other projects that are being implemented by either our partner states or indeed other development partners. So that is also aimed at how we can be able to link. The fourth point that I wanted to say is the allocation of resources. Anticipating that we are going to have programs ahead and long-term planning, I think it's important and critical that we have these project implementation teams that are actually working already and that are structured within, linking within the ministries and the execution agencies. I've seen that when we have very good working relations and establishing these structures, the projects move faster. And lastly, the area that I tried to mention about co-financing approaches, this is really an area we need to work together, especially the REX and even Igad, that your master plans speaking to the country master plans, areas of procurement processes, and I have in mind some of the projects that we are preparing right now that are under the PPPs. They take too long to come into fruition because we cannot reach financial closure very easily because of the differences in terms of the development partners, procurement processes, safeguard approaches, and those projects normally take even longer than the ones for government. What I think perhaps we should be able to employ ourselves is to continuously discuss amongst ourselves to be able to start having convergence on how we approach the co-financing projects, and especially on the private, the PPP projects. We have not a very good experience, but by now, I think especially speaking for Kenya, we have had the PPP unit for some time. There are lessons that we have learned, and I expect that now we could be able to see projects being implemented much more faster than before. But agreements and arrangements around how the private sector and the public sector come together to achieve on a particular project, I think they are very critical areas that we need to have a conversation going forward. Thank you so much, Chair, for giving me this chance to also come back to give our kind of closing remarks on this. Thank you so much, and we look forward to more cooperations.
Yes, AFDB. Giving the floor to Engineer Wakendo from African Development Bank. The floor is yours, Engineer Wakendo.
Thank you and good morning, and thank you for the opportunity. I didn't want to talk, but I want to compliment what Dr. Mongere from JICA has said. First of all, projects take time, and we must appreciate that. For instance, the project that he is implementing, the gateway, I believe that's we are talking about the Likoni Bridge, which is to replace the Likoni ferry. Those projects were identified by ourselves in 2009 as part of the Arusha-Namanga River Road project, which is connecting Kenya and Tanzania across Namanga with a one-stop border post there. And at the time when we identified the need to connect Malindi with the Bergamo, actually Dar es Salaam, the idea was tourism, to open up the area to tourism from Malindi all the way to Dar es Salaam. At the same time, we wanted also to open up and connect the Kilimanjaro-Arusha area, which is very rich in tourism, to the Voi, Taveta, Savo area, which is also very rich in tourism, and to connect it to Mombasa. So we proposed at that time in 2009 to design, to fund the design of Arusha to Voi and Malindi to Bagamoyo, which meant crossing the ferry. And the designs were done, and the implementation has been done on some sections. At least now we have connected Mombasa to Arusha through Voi, which means the imports of northern Tanzania now need not come from Dar es Salaam, but they can pass through a very good paved road, which is shorter. At the same time, now tourists can actually travel by road from Nairobi through to Arusha and back to Voi and to Mombasa. And now, with the projects that we are implementing on the Malindi to Bagamoyo line, we have two already, and we are cooperating with the JICA. That's the one he's talking about. We are cooperating with the JICA in a co-financing mechanism in Kenya, but in Tanzania it's a bank project. We are doing about 150 kilometers. Construction has already, the procurement is finished. Construction will start any moment now. So the point I'm trying to say is, number one, check it out, 2009 and 2021. So there is almost 12 years, and this was a project of close to 800 kilometers. So the implementation has taken its time, but there is progression. The first key thing that happened was the initiation of the idea and the design of the project, so that if somebody comes up with money, there is some documentation which is ready because the detailed design was done. So if there's a project that is late and has not been identified and has not been designed, the time to do it is now, so that we have time to look for funding when it is ready. So I wanted to complement the JICA storyline with the way we have cooperated together and the time. So two things: cooperation, which is emphasized in terms of co-financing, and the time it takes for a project to mature. The earlier we start, the better, which means we need to look for money to prepare our projects in advance, even when we don't have funding for the implementation. The other comment, this is a question to NEPAD, and excuse me for taking you back if you don't mind, Mr. Tichi. Big plans. How are we, what is our plan? What is your plan as AU, and you are really the umbrella organization, in terms of mobilizing of these big funds? What do we have any specific plans? Thank you.
Hello, Tishi. Could you be having some response to the question by African Development Bank on the mobilization of funds for projects? Over to you. Tishi, are you with us, or seems Tishi is not connected at the moment. Maybe he'll be able to come back to us later. Now, I think we now will be proceeding to the break, and then after that we have the breakout sessions. So when we are taking tea, they'll be able to organize this room for the 3 breakout sessions. These 3 breakout sessions will be on infrastructure, transport, and energy. The one of infrastructure, Ethiopia will be sharing. It will be about financing infrastructure in the region, and Mr. Jamie Simpson will be the presenter. Then the other session on transport, Uganda will be the chair, and it will be about rail transport in Kenya, presented by Engineer Tobias Otieno from the Kenya Railways Corporation. And then the third breakout session will be on energy, and Somalia will be sharing this session, and it will be about energy transmission, generation, and trade in the region. And East African Power Pool will be presenting. And in all these breakout sessions, Igad Secretariat will be rapporteuring. So before we break, I just want to mention to you that from the information from JICA and ADB, we have noted that they have JICA, AFDB, and World Bank have a 5-year collaboration on infrastructure financing in the region. And so I would like to request the member states and the partners here to take the opportunity to arrange, if possible, for B2B interaction with them, so that if they have any issues that they would like to raise with the development partners, they can be able to meet them today, especially that we have a JICA and AFDB in the house, and also the World Bank. So I hope you are going to book for an appointment with them to have a B2B interaction with them. So now we proceed for the break, and now it's 11:15. So by 11:45 we should be in the breakout session, participating. Thank you, and thank you very much for your participation.
Recording stopped.